business so that when you walk in, you feel like you belong. And please, welcome Amos Wilson.
Thank you very much. It's indeed a pleasure to be your invited speaker here again today. It's always a pleasure for me to come out and be with you and share some time with you. And I'd like to then speak to the subject for a bit today, and hopefully sort of breaking with old habit, leave enough time for you to talk back with me and for us to share some ideas. I'm very happy that Brother Quayson mentioned our business establishment. It's called the Harlem Graphic Arts Center. We're at 215 West 125th Street. And certainly you are welcome to come over and just come on over and visit us and browse in our establishment there and just kind of see what we're about. Essentially, I am there for a political purpose. Certainly I'm there to run a business, but I'm also there more so to achieve a political goal. And your participation and support of the business is a support of the achievement of the political ends of our people. And this is what it's about. Now, some people will say, well, you don't confuse altruism, social concern with business. But I think we as Africans have never quite thought about it that way, and certainly we don't have to continue to think about it that way. We can combine the two. After all, business does provide a service to the community, and for that reason, of course, it is of use to the community. Certainly, while I am concerned about the political purposes of the business, I recognize, though it is an economic establishment, and that its very first political accomplishment, and one of its most important political accomplishments, is that it is successful. We have to demonstrate very clearly that we as African people can successfully run businesses, and we can run efficient businesses, up-to-date business establishments. I want to establish the fact, along with other black business persons, that the Koreans and Asians are not the only people who can open up businesses on 125th Street, nor anywhere else. That we can open up businesses without going to banks and begging whites for money. When you come over there, you will see a business that's in the midst of growing very well. It's segmented into three major areas: bookstore, copying and printing, and stationery. An approach, of course, that's based on our market, on the needs of the community, as well as an approach that will secure the survival of the business as well. You will find there then a business that tries in the best way possible to exude black culture. We do not believe in the philosophy that it's not about black power, it's about green power. We hear this nonsense all the time out here. Separating money from culture. It's craziness. You don't hear any other ethnic group separating its money power from its ethnicity. You don't hear Asians saying it's about green power, not Asian power. They go together. Or whites denying their whiteness and just for money. It's together. The power of wealth is within black culture, and it is through black culture that we will create wealth and use our wealth to its advantage. We do not have to hide our blackness or our Africanness to make money. It is our Africanness that will earn the money for us. You come into the shop, you will be immediately, I think, overwhelmed by the obvious blackness of the shop. You will see a whole wall of black art there, African art, art that depicts our great leaders, from King to Garvey to Harriet Tubman, Queen Mother Moore, and others. They are there to see. You can see pieces of our great African kings, the African maps. Of course, you see our books, which have to do with African history and anything else related to Africa. And of course, most of all, you see the people who operate in that business operating within the African tradition. And it is that tradition that I believe is going to be responsible for the success of that business. When you come in there, then you will see a business that was not developed by an individual capitalist. Frankly speaking, I had no money when I opened this business up. In fact, I had no job, to tell you the truth. I had been released after 15 years of teaching at my original college. And but it's strange, because when I look back at my career, it is at the time when I am unemployed that I make my greatest progress. It was I don't know whether it's the motivational factor involved there or not. But it's something I recognize, and in fact, in a way, it releases me from this servantism that we often get caught in, and often then without being caught up in the servantism of the system, it gives me a chance to look at my own resources. You will see a business over there as it grows, and we're still in the midst of growing and developing. We still have a way to go yet, so we're not complete in our growth and development, but you will see a business there that, as I said, was not one that was developed out of my own pocket, but developed through the relationship that I made with other Africans as myself. And it truly is a community business in the sense that not only does the community support it, but the members of the community have invested in it. When our minimal investments to start our business essentially amounts to about $50,000 to $60,000. And frankly speaking, I have yet to put in really a significant amount of that investment from my own personal funds, of which I have hardly any. But yet we are able to do it because, as I will speak here later about, of a fundamental thing, and that is the calling upon the culture, calling upon a relationship with people, maintaining a network such that when this job was to be accomplished, I could go to that network of people and go to those friends and go to the culture and say, look, I have an establishment here, and I want to build it in this way and that way. And here's my plan, and here's this, and look at it and see what you can do. And chipped in. People made sacrifices. They're taking risks, and they showed faith and confidence. And so this business then is not merely a capitalist formation that's there to earn wealth for one or two individuals, but it's there to demonstrate that we as people can work together, that we can produce, we can share, we can exhibit confidence and faith in each other, we can love each other, we can be efficient, we can be generous, and we can be friendly in our services, and we can be up to date. In about a couple of weeks or so, if you'll get a chance to come by and get a little tour of our place, you'll see state-of-the-art desktop publishing. We'll have one of the latest computerized typing services in the whole area. Jobs that would take, such as layout jobs that would take 2 or 3 hours to do, we'll essentially be able to do them in 15 to 30 minutes. Merely by projecting it on the screen, our customers can see what the job is going to look like before one bit of print goes on the page. With the push of a button, we can expand headlines, we can move paragraphs around, We can put images on the page. We can change the type style with just the push of a button, so that if you want this style, we just hit the button and that style comes up. If you want another style, that one comes up. And when you approve of your job, we push the button and the job rolls out through the laser printer. And we are able then to give you several copies, or to take the job over to our plate maker and almost immediately put it on the press and get it out while you're waiting for it. So we are about serious business over there. But more than anything else, we're about the fact that the myths that have surrounded black people and the way black people supposedly do business are now about to crumble with our efforts and, of course, with the efforts of others. I'm happy to learn that we're beginning already to get some good imitators. That's what we wanted. You see, and I hear some ads now. People have similar concepts, and people are picking up on the concepts. Our competitors have redecorated their shops, some of them already. And this is exactly what we intended to happen. You know, we wanted to stimulate them to redo their shops and to bring up the level of black business. And you can only do that not by fussing and lecturing and carrying on all the time, but by actually getting into the fray and getting your hands on it and really doing it and motivating other people by example and by concrete work. And so I'm going through that, and I went through this sort of long situation here to give you an idea as to what we are about over there. And of course to indicate that your support is of course needed and invited very much. And that when you support our business there, you're not only supporting me and supporting my partner, but you're supporting a number of other people. We have, even at this point, we've only been open, we're into our third month. And at this point, we have a staff of about 6 persons. And in a couple of more months, 2 or 3 months, we will have to expand that staff by 2 or 3 more. So in this sense, we are providing some employment. Of course, we're providing training. I have a young high school man there now. We'll be pulling up in other young people to apprentice them through the whole process of business, from the whole process of printing to stocks to record keeping to other kinds of things, so that we can expand the talent. One young man that's been with us from the beginning, I'm hoping we've made our goal that of putting him into business, because we think that the end point of our success is the number of people who ultimately graduate out of that place to engage in business of their own. We're not there to keep people captives forever, but to move them forward and move into their own communities and other communities and continue the expansion and growth of black business. So come by, say hello, and give us some support. Just come by and just check us out and see what we are about. Today I want to look then a bit at the subject, the economic psychology of black nationalism or African nationalism. And of course I'd have to do a schematic kind of thing today, because the subject is a very broad one, and obviously in order to give its due we would need much, much more time than we are allotted here today. But I want to emphasize the necessity of economic development for the liberation and advancement of our people. And I think that this is the major task for our current generation. I think each generation has a task that it has to accomplish, sort of like a relay race, in the sense where each generation carries the ball, the baton, a certain distance, and then it is handed on to the next, and the next generation must carry it a distance as well. And I think it becomes interesting to take a schematic look at the history of our people and kind of see how this baton of liberation and advancement of our people has moved thus far up to this point. You look, of course, and I think looking at it this way will help us to be charitable sometimes to our ancestors, who sometimes we are a little harsh on in terms of what they didn't do and how they didn't see certain things. And we have to recognize that each generation does have its blind spots, and ours will have its spots as well. But we must do what we can within our vision. And it is the duty of the following one then to expand that vision and to continue. I can understand why then, in a sense, our ancestors, while in slavery, thought that emancipation would be almost the end-all and be-all for them. And why emancipation would represent, in Martin Luther King's words, free at last, a type of ultimate freedom. And it's understandable, being under such a system of oppression and servitude, that one's vision would be locked on almost the more obvious solution, and that is to break out from under that system. And yet when emancipation was finally accomplished on a certain level, after the period of elation and celebration was over, the inadequacies of that stage of development was becoming apparent. We had then Reconstruction, which in a way then concentrated on a bit of economic and social development of black people and the political development of black people as well. And to a degree, it contributed to the growth and development of black political movement and economic movement and development. However, it had its limitations. The limitations of needing the support of its former slave masters to maintain itself. The limitation that we still suffer from today, and that limitation is that it's all right to have laws, civil rights laws and other kinds of laws, as I will speak a bit about a little later on. But those laws cannot ultimately provide protection for our people. It's all right to be backed by the federal government and the power of the federal government, as our people were during Reconstruction. But what happens when the federal government gives up its support of the laws and of the systems? And we see that Reconstruction, of course, this is exactly what happened. When the federal government gave up its support of its own so-called laws and rules and regulations, then, in a sense, the freedom of the black man was abridged, even more so than before. And there was a period following then of almost a semi-slavery in the form of sharecropping and sort of what we might call wage slavery, followed by Jim Crowism and a type of accommodation to white power and an accommodation to segregation. In a way, while that was bad, it had some other sides to it as well. The development, of course, of some black institutions and of black community, and of course of sharpening the consciousness of many of our people to understand the situation that they were in and to try to strive for solutions to that situation. And of course there were a number of proposed solutions beside the one of accommodation, which we found, of course, still did not give us the freedom and independence and liberation that we desired. The forces that seemingly won the day were the assimilationist forces, the desegregationist forces, the forces under the Du Boises, the NAACP, those forces that still hold sway today, that in a sense sold us a dream, the kind of dream that Martin Luther King sold us as well. The idea being then that the ultimate freedom would be achieved through integration, through assimilation with our former slave masters. That the ultimate dream of freedom and survival and security and respect could be gained through the passing of civil rights laws. And that the ultimate liberation could be attained then when we were able to get whites not to look at us in terms of the color of our skin and in the famous statement of Martin Luther King, but in the content of our character. Very pleasing kind of dream. And apparently it struck the hearts of many of our people because we bought it for a long time. And in a sense, you see the rhetoric of King being profound as it was, because apparently it struck a very deep chord in many of our people. And in many ways, we can't say that King was wrong from a logical point of view, or the assimilationists were wrong from a logical point of view. But we have to recognize that their language, in a sense, had a propositional assumption under it, that if-then kind of assumption. And that is the problem. Any proposition can be true if you grant that the premises are true. You see? And this is something we often forget. If white folk did not see us as black people, then, little black boys and white girls could hold hands here. If white folks did not segregate against us, then we could enjoy the fruits of the society. If they could love us as they love themselves, then we would not have job and racial discrimination, and we could live where we wanted to live, and we could travel the way we want to travel, and we could achieve the way we want to achieve in the society, and we could stop being self-conscious about ourselves, and we can love ourselves and all of that. But we often forget that this is propositional language. If this is the case, then that could be the case. But often we got so caught up with the possibilities of the ifs coming true until we were literally hypnotized by the glittering dream and images held up before our eyes. And many of us were caught up in the images of little black boys and white girls and so forth holding hands. And we got caught up in the so-called beauty of living next door to whites and the beauty of not being self-conscious about ourselves. And it was a wonderful, wonderful dream. And it was so wonderful until often people forgot to consider some other ifs and look at some other possibilities as well. What if they never loved us? What if they could not forget what color we were? You see? What happens then? And this is the major problem I find with the assimilationist philosophy. If what you say comes to be true, well, maybe I wouldn't have too much of a problem with that. But what about the other ifs? It's all right to talk about integration, but let's also talk about disintegration. That word is often forgotten. We were only permitted to hear the term integration, and we were hypnotized by it. Integration, integration, integration. And there was the belief by many of our leaders that once integration was achieved and assimilation was achieved, that then would become a permanent state of existence. And there is no law that guarantees that once you're integrated, that integration from that point on shall last forever. There's no guarantee of that at all. And yet there were many leaders who sort of left us with this vague impression and presented this as something that would be the true case. I often mention this idea in terms of the context of marriage, when people are in love. You know, and when you're first in love and you think that you'll never have an argument, you think you'll never have a fight, and you'll always be sharing and loving to each other until somebody loses a job and falls under the stress of unemployment or gets other kinds of interest. And we see then marital relationships that start out so blissfully and with so much promise fall apart because of economic and other kinds of changes that occur in that relationship. There are many women today who are still suffering from this starry-eyed kind of approach to marriage, who dream the old fairy tale dream of marrying the white knight, the prince, who would take her away from the drudgery of working, and who would marry her because of her beauty and her poise. And therefore she could spend all of her time working on her seductive characteristics, shopping and going to the beauty parlor and buying her clothes and doing all of these kinds of things. And finally she lands that prize, only to find that at some point and for some reason he leaves. And she's faced then with the fact that she's never been employed. She never prepared herself to carry on on her own, to care for her own family. Some women, particularly in the past, were left in such a condition they didn't even know how to write a checkbook or how to pay the telephone bills and things like this because of this kind of romantic concept that once married, once in love, it shall last forever. You know, and the song serenaded us to that, didn't it? When I fall in love, it will be forever. Sort of, it makes me think of the assimilationists. Once we get these whiteys to love us, it will be forever. You know. And that's not necessarily the case. Even if, you see, and we forgot to think about, even if we were to achieve this integration, if whites were to forget about our color, if they were to knock down the barriers and treat us equal to themselves, what would happen if that one day were to change? If they, like an unfaithful husband, deserted or left? Did that remove from us the responsibility for ourselves, the responsibility for developing our own power, for developing our own independence, for developing our ability to see to our survival and our advancement, and our ability to advance our own interests? Unfortunately, in many ways, the assimilationists sold us this kind of program that, in a sense, indicated that we could be relieved of the responsibility of building a culture and a nation and a group coherence that could provide for our survival when and if it was necessary to do so. They sort of misled us into thinking that once we got these people to love us, then they would sort of take care of us. And they would provide for us. They would be good husbands. In a sense, assimilationist philosophy, to me, is similar to the old feminist philosophy, you see, of marrying the persons and marrying into a protective relationship. So if you married a strong man, if you married a wealthy man, if you married into his family and so forth, that then would provide for your continuing security. And in a sense, we saw this rich, white, and powerful society, and we were seduced into thinking if we were to marry into it, then our troubles would be over. And of course, this typically means that many of our potentials, our intellectual potentials, our organizational potentials and so forth, were left undeveloped. Just as many intellectual and other potentials of females were left underdeveloped under the old feminist concept. Why should I learn to think, and why should I learn to take care of myself when all I need to do is marry a good man? You see? And so consequently then, it happens then that some of our sisters did not develop their intellectual characteristics and other parts of their character because of this paternalistic kind of approach to life. And the danger with the assimilationist position is a very similar one. It indicates then, why should we develop a Pan-Africanist organization and relationship when if we just get in and marry these white folk, they'll take care of all our business for us. We don't have to worry about it. We can glorify good old individualism and just let it go at that. We don't even have to worry about defense, because a white man in defending himself is going to defend us. We don't have to worry about making bread for ourselves, because a white man making bread for himself is going to make bread for us. See? So all we have to do is seduce him into loving us and working on his guilt complex and nagging him a bit and keeping him in shape, you see. A typical feminist, old feminist concept. You reduce the more powerful persons and being through manipulating their guilt, their moral obligations. You know, we see a lot during the 60s, right? Moral suasion. Speaking to the humanity in these other people, ultimately converting them, which is a typical ploy of a weak person in relationship to one of strength. You know, to try to convert the stronger in some sort of way or other, rather than building up their own power and their own development, you see. So you still get this feminist, and I'm speaking of that in the old sense. I hope you note that, ladies. I'm not speaking of the current approach, but in the old approach, which, of course, women were the first ultimately to recognize work to their disadvantage and are about changing at this very time, and came to recognize that that old approach, through the use of the seduction and using one's weakness for strength, is not going to secure the liberation and induce the development of the potentials of the females. And of course, then we as people must recognize a similar thing in our own circumstance. So being dazzled by the dream, we forgot to ask the question, what would happen if, after all of this beautiful relationship we have with these people, for some reason or other they decide to divorce us? And we, in the meanwhile, having been so caught up in the romance of being loved by such powerful people and so-called beautiful people and so forth, we neglected to develop our own potentials. We neglected to organize ourselves. And we neglected to prepare for the possibility that the divorce would occur. So you see, it is now the task of our generation to look beyond the dream and ask that what if question. We see the white man today struggling for his own existence. I was telling an audience last week, PTA in Queens here, as a matter of fact, that you're worried about being equal to white children, and the white man is worried about the fact that his children are not equal to the Japanese. So you're worried about being equal to a people themselves who are in a losing struggle. So after you get equal to him, you'll still find that you're going to be still in an inferior position. It is time to look beyond the white man even as a point, a standard of measurement. We must prepare to compete with many ethnic groups. The white man is not the only ethnic group we have to compete with at all. In fact, by the time we get online, he may not be worth competing with. And if he is in a struggle for his own existence, and his own existence is in jeopardy, you know then that his concern for our existence is going to become less and less, and in fact, he will become even more hostile to our existence. You know, in the old days, when the price of cotton would go down, the number of lynchings of black people would go up. And there was a correlation between the drop in the price of cotton and the lynching of black people. You see, this foolish belief of the white man as a god is a part of that dream, you see. The stupid belief that the white man somehow, because we've gone to all of these movies and read all of these books and believed all of this propaganda where the white man always wins. And so since these are our white folk, we just feel like they're going to win all the time. And therefore we figure as long as we're connected to them, we're always going to be on the winning side. There's no guarantee of that at all. And I think the current struggle with the Japanese and the Koreans and other people are beginning to demonstrate that very, very clearly. That these people are not necessarily all-time winners. And we have to look at that very closely. We have to recognize the fact that civilizations come and go, and they rise and fall. And the white man is not going to get an exemption from this cyclic nature of civilizations any more than we got an exemption from it. Our civilizations occurred first and laid the foundations for the ones that are here today. And yet they passed away. And we look back, we look at Greek civilizations and Roman civilizations and others, and they come and they bloom and they go. I guess it's a common belief, though, for those people who are parts of those civilizations to believe that somehow theirs is going to escape. You know, the wheel of karma. You know, somehow. I could imagine the Greeks thought that theirs was going to escape, you know, and the Romans somehow thought that theirs was going to go on forever. And of course, we are caught up in this one, and somehow we figure, you know, that these people are going to come out of it all right. There's no guarantee of that at all. As a matter of fact, when we look on the horizon, then we see the waning of the European civilization. And the major question for us as Africans, as I've put it before a number of audiences, is, are we now going to struggle after some hundreds of years to get out from under the power of the European only to fall under the power of the Asian? Is it going to be now another couple of thousand years that we're going to be under the thumb or the foot of the Asian? And I think when we look at our communities, we're beginning to see the very first forebodings of that kind of thing. This is why our generation is so crucially important. Because it's how we perform as a generation that's going to answer that question. Are we going to subject our children and generations of our grandchildren to the domination not of Europeans, but to the domination of Asians? Do not let the word third world throw you and deceive you. A lot of us want to throw a lot of different interests under that term. And it makes many of us think that that makes us all alike. You know, Latins and blacks and Indians and this. It's a terrible mistake. to think in those terms. We as African people will have to compete against South America too. Face it, I know it's unpleasant. You cannot just include people simply because they are non-white into your own associations. The Japanese will be our competitors and our competitors already. And therefore we have to recognize the fact that in the world the way it is currently constituted, we are going to have to compete against a number of groups of people. Not just whites, but Asians, Latin Americans, and others as well. And while we use the rhetoric third world, and we can identify on many levels with other so-called third world people, we must not let that blind us to the realities of our situations and to the fact that Japan and other Asians will dominate us as well as any other group. And we have to prepare for that eventuality. And therefore our competition and our struggles should not be just against these whites, but we have to look on a global level at things. We've become too obsessed by whites anyway. We permitted whites to fill our vision and block us from seeing what else is going on in the world. And this will be to our detriment if we continue to do this kind of thing. The assimilation has made us think that once we got the civil rights laws, everything would be all right. A very fatal way of thinking. I was reviewing last Sunday with sons and daughters in Harlem somewhat the so-called state of the African today, and I was looking, of course, at the Africans in America, and you look at the contradictions. We have the equal housing laws, and what is our major problem today? Housing. Homelessness. What's going on here? You get the law in the books, you got a Human Rights Commission, and the whole bit, and the major problem is homelessness. With the law in the book, by the way. We got desegregated schools, a bunch of white teachers, and white appropriate education of black people. Yet we have desegregation. We have the 1954 Supreme Court ruling. We have people on the Supreme Court, we have federal judges, and we're still struggling with what? Injustice. We got a black police commissioner, and we're getting boys shot out here in Queens. People shot down in the streets. And we can go on and on like this all night, showing the contradiction between law, between commissions, and all of these other things that were supposed to secure for us freedom and liberation. And yet we see the sufferings of our people today. And they have not been secured by these things. Law does not protect anyone. The law doesn't protect anyone, ladies and gentlemen. A law is a bunch of words written on a page. Protects nothing. Guarantees nothing. It is only the enforcement of the law that determines freedom and liberation. You can write as many laws on the books if you want to. If those laws are not enforced by the powers that be, then you may as well not have any laws. So we neglected in our thinking The whole concept of power. The idea being that the whites passed the law, and therefore somehow they would become subject to the law that they passed. And their ability to pass the law indicates their ability to do what? Rise above it. To unpass it if they want to. To not enforce it if they wish to. I saw in the New York Times the other day the black gentleman that resigned from one federal agency. What was the reason? Because the Reagan administration is refusing to what? Enforce the laws. And the only thing he can do is resign in frustration, and his name will soon be forgotten. Headline one day. Because the ultimate thing is the power, not law. Because it is the powerful that what? Make the law and enforce the law. And the idea then that in a moment of weakness and guilt, you can make a bunch of people pass laws, and that these laws, quote unquote, are going to protect you, is one that is in the end somewhat nonsensical. And it's this belief that, as I've told people before, if it happens one day that the white man has to make a choice between feeding his children and feeding ours, no civil rights law is going to guarantee that our children get fed. You can quote the law all you want to. None whatsoever. And it can be that way one day, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know. Some change in climate, some blight in the agricultural area. We have germ warfare being developed today where a release of bacteria or release of some germ could literally wipe the bread out for this whole nation within a very short period of time. You see, there's suspicion that AIDS is an artificially created disease. Some of you might have heard me talking on Bob Law's show one evening about how 23 universities in this country were dedicated to creating new diseases. That the function of medical doctors is not merely that of curing diseases, but of making diseases. You must understand that every profession and every institution in a society functions to maintain that society. And it operates as a two-edged sword. It can go backwards and forwards. And therefore, the function of the medical establishment is not merely to cure diseases, but to create diseases as well. And you will find that many medical schools engage in the development of germ warfare. And many American universities, including also the New York, Board of Health. Very much concerned with it. As I've told many people before, the university is there to maintain the society. It's only there secondarily to give people jobs. And it gives people the jobs that maintain the society. But you must not think of the university as a place where you get a job and you're able to buy a little house later on the corner. The ultimate function of the university is to provide the culture with knowledge and technology and information and so forth to maintain and advance the interests of that culture. And therefore it is out of MIT and Princeton and Yale and Harvard and Caltech and all the others that the atomic bombs and hydrogen bombs and satellite programs and Star Wars and all of these systems that are used to maintain the power of this country will flow from. And the principal function of their professors is to do research for the United States of America and for European interests. And they only secondarily teach students and prepare students for jobs. That is their function. And consequently then you will see universities and professors involved in the development of death machines of all types. And I won't get off into that at this point, except to say, that education under the European system is a sickness. It is being educated into craziness and madness. And I've told you before that the most dangerous people in the world are educated people. That it will not be the people out here selling crack that will destroy you. It won't be the muggers that destroy you. It will be PhDs who have made weapons that will rain down on you from 500 and 600 and 1,000 miles in space that will bring an end to your life and an end to all life. These very people that you hold up as examples, who are the paragons of honesty and good citizenship, who go out of their two-car garages and make research on how to kill people, that are going to bring an end to the world. But of course they focus our attention on minor cases. The dope men on the corner. Not that they don't need to be dealt with. Don't get me wrong. They do. But you have to also look at the bigger picture here of what is going on in the education. Now what am I saying here then? Suppose the Russians release a germ in the breadbasket of the United States. And we one day will be begging for bread. Or other kinds of things can happen. And there has to be a choice then between the survival of the Europeans and survival of Africans in this country. A breakdown of economic systems is notorious for bringing a breakdown in social organization, a breakdown in law, and a breakdown in order. And this is what you will be confronted with. A breakdown in the economic system of this country will bring down breakdowns in other areas, and therefore you will not be able to call upon the law to protect you. You will have to only be able to call upon whatever power you have within yourself to protect your own interests as a people. So while the integrationist dream may come true, and while we may enjoy the fruits of integration, we can still never forget the other possibilities. And we must still prepare for those other possibilities, because that's the wise thing to do. You see? And consequently then, whether assimilationism is your goal or whatever is your goal, the ultimate idea of being prepared to secure one's own survival should still be at the center of focus. The preparation for various contentions, what ifs, still have to be at the center of one's thinking. And so ultimately, whatever political direction you may decide to take, in the end you've got to look beyond the dream and deal with the what ifs and prepare yourself to deal with those things. So we have to know then, while looking at the contributions of those who've gone on before us, we have to now expand the vision. And I am a great admirer of Martin Luther King. I looked again, and it's hard for me to look at those programs and not be filled with the with sympathy and a love for this man. Doesn't say I can't criticize or look objectively at the situation. Because see, some people get you wrong. They think if you say a crooked, you don't like him. No, that's not it at all. He is no different from all of us. All of our visions are limited. My vision is limited. I am no God. We are not gods. We cannot see the total future. And despite the fact that I may disagree in some instances with the goals of his program and those who have taken after him, I still must admire his willingness to sacrifice his very life to the achievement of those goals. and to give up so many things to go after it. And I challenge black nationalists who have great ideas and great, concepts, and who are very heavy on the analyses and the critical thinking, to make a similar sacrifice and put your own self out there the way things are. You cannot assure that you will pass on to the next generation the right concepts. You try it as hard as you can. And that's all we're called on to do. We try very much to see reality for what it is. And we look in it, and it's our duty to think and look and search and try as hard as we can to see reality and be objective. But even with all of our trying, we miss sometimes. But we can pass on to them the fighting spirit, our will, our willingness to sacrifice for what we believe was right, and our willingness to forego some of the so-called pleasures and other things of this world to accomplish our goals. Because without that will, great intellectual dreams and critical analyses will come to nothing. And we have some nationalists think that their job is done when they run a great lecture and that is filled with keen insight. That's just the beginning. In fact, that is the accompaniment of work, not the end point of work. And this is one of the reasons why, as I mentioned earlier when I came, I mentioned about my own business over there. It was easy to talk about the Asians being in the Harlem community. But to what degree am I willing to actually become a member of the front lines to struggle against that taking over the community and make the necessary sacrifices? And this is the kind of thought I think that will move us forward. Let's look again then for a moment at economic development. I think this is a part of our task now, this current generation. We've gone through the slavery and through emancipation and Reconstruction, Jim Crowism, accommodationism, desegregation and civil rights laws, and in ways they have expanded our consciousness. They have allowed us to see their faults. They have allowed us to a degree to benefit from whatever benefits they had to offer. We cannot stop now in a state of confusion. We have to move on to the next step, the next level of development. And for people who've been disrespected and degraded, perhaps it is not too unusual that they thought their major goal was to be loved by the people who degraded them. And they concentrated on that. For people whose confidence in themselves was lowered and whose potentials were restricted, perhaps it is understandable to a degree that they thought by attaching themselves to their former masters, they somehow could overcome their problem. We now, though, have the advantage of seeing that that is not going to solve the kind of problems that confront us. We have the advantage of hindsight. So our job is not to condemn them, but to move beyond them and to carry it another step, as our children and grandchildren will carry it beyond where we are today. And I think now, since the major issues of desegregation and accommodationism and so forth have been dealt with, it is time for us now to focus on some other issues. And one of the issues, and there are other issues, one of the issues, of course, is that of economic development and economic enterprise. Many of our people have problems with this concept of economics. Many nationalists are still wrestling with it. How do we fit it into our program? What is it about? Because many of us, nationalists and otherwise, are still identified with poverty. We still think somehow poverty is more virtuous than wealth. That poverty makes us somehow more holy, and we get self-righteous in our poverty. And we point a malnutrition finger and try to condemn those who have decided to take advantage of their natural and human resources. And we watch our children die over the world, in Africa and in the Caribbean and in America and in other places, feeling righteous about our poverty and our identification with it. We allow ourselves now to be on the very edge of extinction, and we are on the edge of extinction. And I've mentioned to you many times, when you look at the science fiction movies, you can see and read the science fiction books that as the European thinks out what he's going to do with the future, the black man is not a part of it. Some of us, I don't think, recognize what a precarious position we are in as people. When blacks are really no longer needed in this country and may no longer be needed on the earth itself. We talked about how the neutron bomb was created essentially as a third world weapon to remove the human beings and leave their resources intact so that they could be utilized by the remaining people. That tomorrow, if Reagan and Gorbachev met and decided that they would rid the earth of its African inhabitants, there would be no African nation that could defend the interests of African people. In this day and age of Star Wars and weaponry moving out in space, we have yet to make the jet age in reality. And therefore, we are literally defenseless against warfare coming from space itself. We are not able to even move from one planet to another, as the European is preparing himself to do. The European is preparing to build an artificial planet, space stations, to secure his genes. And we're still just thinking about getting a job. The European is already doing geological surveys of the moon and other planets. And is already talking about mining those planets and looking at their commercial possibilities. If you go downtown around 59th Street, you can buy something called Commercial Space, a magazine called Commercial Space, dedicated to the commercial utilization of space. And we're still worried about Koreans over here in Harlem. People getting ready to take advantage of the moon. Zimbabwe is having, Zambia is having riots over there. And almost social chaos over food. And as a result of the fact that the price of copper has sunk very low, and therefore the economy has been vastly disturbed, and there's a threat of social disorganization as a result of the fact that you have an economy built around essentially one product. And the pricing of that product and the use of that product is in the hands of Europeans. And therefore, they manipulate the rise and fall in organizations of nation through the manipulation of price. And, of course, the estimation is that even those resources, which are the foundations of their economy at this point, that is the resources of copper, will be gone in 20 years. How do they eat then, if they are hardly eating now? How does the whole of Africa eat? when its resources have been sucked out of its soil and there's no more to be exploited there. When at that point the European is now beginning to suck resources from the moon or from other places. Or as the Reagan administration has made very clear, they will not give the Africans and other weak nations access to the resources of the sea. What happens after then, after the resources are gone? So see, we have to look beyond the dream. We have to look into the future and prepare ourselves for dealing with that future. And this is our task. And we have to recognize then that a concern with economic development is at the very center of our survival as people. It's not just about getting status and getting into the American mainstream and this kind of business. It's about the sheer business of surviving, feeding each other, supporting each other, and providing for our generation and the coming generations. We can no longer ignore the issue of economics. We're going to have to confront it head on and straightforward, not through some theoretical mumbo-jumbo of Marxism and all these other Eurocentric theories that some of our enlightened brothers so easily toss about and debate endlessly. And while we were going through endless debates about capitalism and Marxism and so forth, the Asians are just taking the community and working it through. We must recognize then that the center of African concern has always been economics. I don't know where we got off of this tangent. On this tangent here, that economics are not the center point of any people's development, and how we became to identify with poverty. And some people have enough nerve to try to even justify it in terms of some kind of weird African philosophy. You know, you have to watch those people who jump and use Africa to cover up all their problems, you know. You have a lot of that going on today, too. That's the way the Africans did it. You know, as if that's the end all concern. Ladies and gentlemen, even the way the Africans did it must come under scrutiny. I'm telling you. The mere calling back on tradition, and often the tradition many people call on is fictitious anyway, is not enough to silence the concerns that we need that confront us. And, you know, some people sort of pull that out as a last, you know, that last and final statement. It's African. And then at that point you're supposed to cease thinking, you know, and analyzing. And note, the African thing often appears to go along with their restrictive view of things. It's also African to be concerned about wealth. You are not going to find any, or maybe I won't be so bold, but I think it would be hard put to find any great civilization or people that also did not have a very strong social, political, economic foundation for their greatness. And in a sense, we almost want to be great, and we want to be respected, and we want to have security, and all these other things without having an economic system to back it up. And I think when you search history, you will find that economic greatness and so forth were together and combined and were reciprocally influential, one on the other. And you don't leave one out without the other. We often call on Egypt as an example. And quoting John Jackson, Introduction to African Civilizations, Egypt's first golden age was initiated by an invasion from Ethiopia. According to Chancellor Williams, the South actually had all Egypt at its mercy. The South was the real source of Egypt's wealth, as it had been of Egypt's civilization. And so we see again wealth and civilization. being coterminous here. And that wealth, and it's the wealth of the South that's laying the basis for the greatness of Egyptian civilization. The gold mines were there. Appropriate organization. We see then these cultures, the African cultures and other cultures, using their economic base as the basis for their greatness and for their power. I wish I had time to go through a few things. I just want to show you a few examples of, because there's so many. This book is very rich. I like the idea here that there's very little waste on nonsense. The examples occur one right after the other. Some people are shocked, for instance, when I say that you really don't need banks to perpetuate economic growth among our people. That's not the basic need. And it's interesting to note Light's discussion of banks, and here he talks about, for instance, the first black bank occurring, I think, between 1888 and 1900. And he talks about 134 black banks, I believe, by the end of 1935. And yet, how those banks contributed little, if anything, to the economic growth and development of black people. And how the Chinese and the Japanese lost 100% of their banks, and yet progressed in their economic development. In fact, he goes on to explain how, in a way, it was the development of banks among black people in America that, in a sense, stifled their economic growth. It's interesting to look at that. It becomes interesting, too, to note that the Japanese were discriminated against in very heavy ways, pretty much the way we were discriminated against as people as well. Even laws that were passed forbidding them to purchase land. How they, too, did not get loans from banks and were turned off for credit. How they, too, now we as blacks say, well, you know, we're so obviously non-European. So that's one reason why we are easy targets for discrimination. But I think the Japanese and Chinese are pretty obviously non-European as well. And in a sense, blacks were more familiar, I think, to whites than perhaps even the Chinese and the Japanese were. And yet, despite this lack of so-called banks and the whole bit, the Japanese were able to develop economically and develop and outstrip in terms of the percentage of people engaged in business and other things, even their white counterparts. And we see today, if you look at them as a group, their earning power is higher than that of whites. And we can name other groups. Of course, the so-called West Indian group is of interest in this regard as well. How were they able to achieve this growth and development? You see. And it's interesting to note then his discussion of the various ways. He talks here about the revolving credit idea, sometimes referred to as susu. And some of you are familiar with that word. In Africa, which in some areas referred to as isusu, a very strong institution in Nigeria, a part of the African culture, an economic system that was used as a basis for credit and a basis for economic development, that happened to be remembered by Afro-Caribbeans, but for some reason was forgotten by Afro-Americans, and was used by Afro-Caribbeans to advance their economic development and interest in America, but was not utilized by African-Americans, which omitted and did not necessitate being rejected by banks and getting the idea that I've seen run into many blacks now. You know, as soon as they think about going into business, the next idea hits them. Where am I going to get the money from? They tell me, and you know, the idea that they learn in these modern classes, it says, you know, you go to the bank and you apply to the bank. When you and it's interesting to note that the Chinese had a very similar system. The Japanese had a very similar system as well, that permitted them to use their own internal resources for development. Now we call it more familiarly a revolving credit association. Let me just run one quote here. He talks about in terms of the Chinese. The Chinese have a peculiar method of obtaining funds without going to commercial banks. If a responsible Chinaman needs an amount of money, he will organize an association, each member of which will promise to pay a certain amount on a specified day of each month for a given length of time. For instance, if the organizer wants $1,300, he may ask 12 others to join with him, and each will promise to pay $100 each for 13 months. The organizer has the use of the $1,300 the first month. When the date of the meeting comes around again, the members assemble and each pays his $100, including the organizer. All but the organizer who has had the use of the money bid for the pool. The man paying the highest bid gets the amount of the bid to each of the other. The man paying the highest bid gets the amount of the bid pays the amount of the bid, to each of the others and has the money. This continues for 13 months. Each man makes his payment each month, but those who have already used the money cannot bid for it again. By the end of the 13-month period, each is paid in $1,300 and have had the use of the whole amount. And of course, you will see this, for instance, here's a mention of the Japanese. Few Japanese were able to expand their business individually to any great extent. Possibly without a system of cooperative financing, the Japanese would not have developed the economic structure they did. Fortunately, they met their needs through adaptation of Japanese customs, such as the money pool known as tanamoshi. It is difficult to ascertain the extent to which such pools were used by Japanese immigrants, but from the widespread recognition of its use, it was probably of no inconsequential part of their financing practices. The largest hotel ever attempted by the Japanese, a transaction involving some $90,000, was financed on the basis of tanamoshi. And it goes on to talk about mentioning here the Yoruba associations. There is a certain society called Isusu. This society deals with monetary matters only, and it helps its members to save and raise money thus. Every member shall pay a certain fixed sum of money regularly at a fixed time, say every 5th or 9th day. And one of the subscribing members shall take the total amount thus subscribed for his or her own personal use. The next subscription shall be taken by another member. This shall so continue rotationally until every member has taken. And it goes on to mention how this system was used by Jamaicans in London. Methods of saving vary, but the most prevalent is the friendly cooperative effort, normally referred to by Jamaicans as partner. The other names for the similar system in the eastern group of islands are Susu and Syndicate. This is a simple method based on mutual trust between friends and relations, complete confidence in the man or woman who is organizer. 15 or 20 people pay a weekly sum of between £1 and £5 through the organizers, either by drawing lots or prior arrangement. The total amount at the end of each week goes to one of the 20. In some instances, weekly payments necessitate a strenuous saving effort, but in most cases, the partners is carried on time and again with satisfaction on all sides. And we can go on naming this particular method. And here you see this particular method being adapted, a method coming out of the culture itself, a method adapted to the reality of the people using it, a method then that was used for the advancement, the economic and social advancement of the people concerned. You see in the African American the adoption of foreign methods, methods not related to his African background nor to his political economic realities. And the major problem today in the economic development of black people is the lack of an economic system based on what I call a sound cultural analysis. And I don't mean a cultural analysis that goes on talking about how white folks mistreated us. That is not a cultural analysis, ladies and gentlemen. We got a lot of people here just doing endless research on how white people mistreated black people and getting all fired up over these kind of issues, instead of looking deep into the heart and soul and mentality of black people and looking deep into the character of black people and looking deeply at the organization of money and economy within the black community and using that analysis to create a realistic system. We got a lot of fools here reading Marx and other kinds of people whose analysis is based upon Europeans and who didn't come in with preconceived ideas to impose upon the African situation. And one thing I pointed out again and again and again, you can look at any African society, and whether it is Marxist, socialist, capitalist, or any other kind of ist, it is poor compared to its European people. And that must recognize then that the problem we confront is deeper than subscribing to European doctrines of Adam Smith and Marx. That subscribing to these European doctrines are not the solutions to our problems. Marxist theory is based upon an analysis of European culture, and his economic recommendations are based upon that analysis. And we have some fools here who want to call it scientific, and as if it's somehow universal and above and untouchable. And yet when they look at it in country after country in Africa and other places that have subscribed to it without being realistic about their economic and social position in the world, they can see that it has not benefited very much those nations and those people. And yet they react by holding on even more tenaciously to a philosophy that even the Russians are throwing out, that even the Chinese are throwing aside. And everybody's throwing aside that this Negro, the poorest of all, who is still trying to hold on to it for dear life and is not surviving. Does that mean Marxist ideas are no good? No, it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that at all. Does that mean we can't use it? No, I'm not saying that either. What I am saying, though, is develop your economic and social philosophy based upon your own political and social reality first. Now, you may find, as I have found when I look directly at the heart and soul of our people, that many of your conclusions may coincidentally parallel those of Marx. But the origin is not Marx. The origin is from our own selves. And that means that those ideas are our possession. And we don't have to ask white Marxists or any other group to interpret them for us. Any other group doesn't come into us and say, well, you know, our people started and Marx was a Jew or whatever, and, you know, we have the right to interpret what he meant by this and that. We don't have to deal with that. We can deal with it because we've developed it out of our own hearts and our own soul and our own reality. When I was trying to go into business, it puzzled me for a long time. Where is the black money? Where is it? You know? Black people, we hear again and again, if you look at the collective earnings and resources of black people in America, you have to recognize that they are the 9th or 10th richest nation on this earth. That we trade more with this country than does the whole nation of Canada. that we represent a tremendous amount of wealth. And that the problem then with the black community is not a problem of poverty, but it is the correct utilization of the wealth that we have and the correct development of the wealth that we have as people. It is the malallocation of the money that we have, not the lack of money at all. I was interested in one example he gave here of the Japanese tailor who was selling suits for $35, and he's selling to other poor Japanese who could not pay $35 at one time for a suit. So how do they solve the problem? The tailor's got to stay in business. The other people need a suit. Do they go down to SBA and apply for a loan? They could afford $5 a week, though. So they pull 7 people together. Then the 7 put in their $5, and the first man gets his $35 suit. The tailor gets paid. The other man takes the suit home. And the next week, the next $35 come in, and on it go. And the money revolves, and the wealth revolves, and there's growth and development within the community, you see. Not looking outside of themselves, but looking where? Within themselves. Because ultimately, that is the source of wealth. Not being externalized, but internalized and looking into themselves is the basis of wealth. And using the revolving credit. These people did not go on welfare because they saw the welfare of their people as being their responsibility. And they organized in groups and clans and so forth and saw to the welfare of their members so that it was not necessary for them to go on welfare. And they took care of their members. And it served some other social and political purposes as well. It's very interesting to note those purposes. Contrast that with the Urban League and the social work approach that we find so prevalent in our community. That does not harness the resources of the so-called poor and use those resources and recirculate those resources and organize the poor in a way that their money can increase and be used for their advantage, but, takes a social work approach of delivering services from some external agency on to the people. A part of the receipt of benefits within the Japanese society was that you had to be a member of that society. And you were connected in that society. You were unified with the group. And it's within the context of this unity and membership that protection for the members take place. I realized as I tried to develop this business over here that the problem was not money in getting this business, because I hear a lot of people say, well, you must be paying healthy rent over there. But my idea was if the Asians could pay their rent in Harlem and make a living, using only whose money? Black folks' money. Black folks' money. They're not even using Asian money up there. The Koreans are not even coming up there to do their shopping. And the others, they shopping somewhere in Koreatown, maybe somewhere else. Okay? The Hispanics, it's our money supporting their families, paying that rent. And believe me, rent on 125th Street can go as high as $5,000 or more a month. Favorite Shoes pays $10,000 a month right on that corner. But they have employees there, ladies and gentlemen. They're making money there. That implies what? That there is money over there. And if you can support this kind of rent with our kind of money, then we can support our own people with this kind of money. We can employ our own children with this kind of money. We can train and apprentice our own youth. We can get them out of the idea of having to steal and do the other kind of things that they do in these other places. We can build respect for self. I might have mentioned the fact I ran into one lady one evening. She mentioned that she lived out there somewhere. And I saw some sick Negro piece in New York magazine. a very ill piece. If you read this one here, blacks at the top. Read this confusion. Very, 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 very ill. Pitiful. Because it shows they've reached the top and they still have problems. Identity problems and all kinds of other problems. That Frazier talked about even years ago in the Black Bourgeoisie. And somebody said, I'm scared to go to Harlem. You know, it's got a bit. Scared. It is a pity when you become more frightened among your own people than you do among another group of people. That is a real indictment, and many of us have that kind of fear. And we talk about the Howard Beaches, but still, on the whole, many of us still feel a little safer walking in those communities or some other communities than we do of our own. That is a major indictment of us as people. And who are we frightened of? Of our youth. Of our youth. That they're going to snatch our pocketbooks, or they're going to stab us, or they're going to do something to us. And that's a real fear, and it's a fear that has to be dealt with. And I'm not saying this is an illusion. It's real. And I'm not covering it over. It's a fear, and it's a real concern. But what is the solution? To run out to Westchester, to run out here? Is that the end point of it? Not at all. In fact, that is a part of the basis for that fear having been created. And I told her, I said, you know, and she said, oh, they don't give me any respect. But it's interesting that you want respect from these youngsters when you're hardly contributing anything to their economic and social development at all. Why should they respect you? When you take your monies and your brain power and your other interests out and give it to another people, in a way, their anger and hostility has a certain logic to it. Because we've betrayed them. We have not given them an economic and social system and political system and network. We have not given them their inheritance and their due. We've robbed them of their inheritance. And consequently, they strike back at us with the only weapons that they're left with dishonor and with disrespect. And when we speak, they don't listen. Why should they? You don't pay my bills, right? In a way, they're right. What do we have to say about it? We are not feeding them. We are not caring for them. It's Big Daddy White Man. He's the ultimate papa in the world. So the only person I need to listen to is that one. And therefore, if we're to get back our self-respect and the respect of our children, then we have to establish control over our economic and social situation. The ownership of 125th Street, the ownership of all of these other streets around here, the ownership of downtown Manhattan is greater than any series of 10,000 lectures about the greatness of African people, I'm telling you. It's a contradiction to talk to your children about the greatness of African people. And then when they walk out, you know, the whole community and everything is owned by somebody else. It's a joke. And in the end, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to be bothered with it. Because it doesn't develop into anything concrete, usable, a type of pride that doesn't take them anywhere, and they see often only leads them to trouble, and a kind of radicalism that doesn't permit them to become, quote unquote, a part of the so-called mainstream. African nationalism must pay. We must demonstrate to people that believing in this ideology is not taking the side of poverty and degradation, but is a movement into wealth, and a movement into power, and a movement into greatness. And this is a part of the thing I'm about there. I'm trying to demonstrate, hey, I believe in Africa. I love Africa. I am African. And I believe in the greatness of my people. And it pays. It pays. There's wealth connected with this belief. There's power connected with this belief. There's strength and respect connected with this belief. Not just an empty knowledge of history and an empty boasting that tries to substitute for a hungry stomach, but something that's real, that translates into real power. And this is what we must demonstrate. And when our children can walk out and see that, the Africanness is absorbed into their very bone marrow. It becomes a part of their lifeblood. And there's no reason why we cannot think of taking over the economic reins of this country. When we look at what the thing that I learned there, and the thing that I think you see in these many examples that Light gives here, is not so much the money, but the social relationship between people as being the very key. The social relationship and interrelationship between people. These systems cannot work unless there is trust, unless there is confidence in one another. Some of these associations work because they were kinship groups. Some of them work because they came from the same village or carried the same last name. But they came from some cultural entity that tied them together emotionally and socially such that they could trust each other. They could make loans then without collateral because their word was their bond, and it was important that their family honor be kept high because that was the basis for which they gained their wealth to advance their economic and social interests, you see. So that when I say something, I say it because my family will back me up, and even if I fail, my family will see that my debt is paid. Because it is dishonorable for me to make this pledge to you from my village, from my people, from my background, and not pay you back. And the whole family was a part of that, you see. And you can see then it was the social relationships more so than the banks or any other financial instrument that we look so much to today that was the foundation of the growth and development of these people and allowed them to move forward. And I recognize in my own business development over there in Harlem, it was the same thing as I told you. I lost my job last year because of the kinds of stands I take. But I saw this place there. And how did I get it? Because I had talked to a guy in friendship one day. Comes up to the shop. We just talked. Oh, yeah, I remember you. You used to be on the radio. You used to be the communicator. You know, and some of you might remember the communicator back in the 60s, 70s, RVR. Beautiful vignettes of black life and the whole bit. And so you just talk and reminisce, and, you know, there's a whole beautiful social moment there of connection. And we became friends. And then I saw this place to be rented there. And I went downtown, and I said, let me see who owns this place so I can see what the rent is. Still, there's no money in my pocket, you know. And I have to tell people, because the first question they often ask was, what's the rent? And right away when they hear the rent, they're through. So I think don't ask the rent and don't ask about where you're going to get the money from. Cue in on what you want to do. And start about doing it as if you have what is necessary to get it done. And you'd be surprised at how things begin to fall in place for you. And then it forces you to begin to be creative, you see, in your thought processes and things like this, and to look at alternatives and things that were not visible before. They become visible then, but if you give up at the first instant when you hear that rent, then all the other part is never going to come up. It's nil from that point on. I looked in there and I said, oh, this place is rented by Harlem Commonwealth Council. Let me call them up and ask about it. And when I call up, who answers the phone but the person I had talked to? Hey, this is you, Amos. Yeah, this is you. I'm in now. business. And of course, here comes these forms. What was your earnings last year? You know, all of those kinds of things. But I had a friend there. You see what I'm saying? Because I didn't have your accountant send us. I don't have that, man. I'm not, we don't have that kind of thing, This is my idea. This is my dream. This is, where I want to go with it. Well, can you send this? No, I can't do that now. But hey, I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to struggle for you. And he fought and he struggled, and there were people in there who wanted to do business as usual. And he got through. Now my next problem was, how in the hell am I going to get the rent up? But I got that. Creative thinking, though. Let's get upon it. Like, somebody's got a house here. Paid for. Oh, you got to take chances. You got to take risks. I mean, it's no business. And a lot of us want to go into business without taking risks. When we talk about Egypt and its greatness, Egypt had to defend this agriculture. It had to defend its wealth. It had to struggle. Often, sometimes it had to take from. People lost lives and they took risks and chances. And too many of us want the goodies without taking any risk whatsoever. But then we have the issue of, how are we going to start this thing? See, well, I got a friend over there. They've been pinching pennies for the last 20 years. Let's go over here and let's talk a little bit. They're good buddies. They've been talking black nationalism all this time. Figure they put their money where their mouth is. But I just don't go over there and say, hey, man, let me have this. I'll pay you back Saturday. No. Look at the place. Look at the location. Look at the size. Look at the position. Look what I want to put here and what I want to put there and this and that. Of course, look at me. Do you have confidence in me? Do you have confidence in my skills? Have we known each other long enough that you can have faith that I'm going to do right by you? And have we gone through enough times and you can see that you can trust me and so forth and so on? That has to be dealt with. Do you think it's possible? I have to sell that too. You see, but I'm talking to my own here. It's a great difference. And it's not the humiliation of trying to sell myself to some white man. You see, and it's a talk and a sharing and understanding his risk and understanding her risk, and that they're putting savings and things, and it's a responsibility on me because I want to maintain the friendship and I want to maintain the relationship. And here are people investing years of savings and so forth. I mean, I can't play games with it. Let's write a contract. Contract between old friends, people? Definitely. The best way to preserve a friendship is to make it legal and to make it right. I've seen many a Negro taken because they got into African nationalism. Man, we ought to trust each other. I know one person, well, I saw her at the Third World, and I thought, sure, she was, because, at the First World. Because she was there listening to the lectures, and she was, wearing the African garb and the whole bit, I figured they were going to be all right. Nonsense. You've got to look into the character of people you deal with, not the ideology. All kinds of characters can hide behind ideology. You see. And many people are into black nationalism for the wrong reasons. And there are many reactionaries who are into black nationalism. And when you really get to know them deeply, they are still the old, good old-fashioned assimilationists. But who, because they've been rejected, they're going through their little anger period right now. But if that white bear said tomorrow, I love you, they'd jump right into his arms. Yeah. Because, as I've said, the ultimate philosophy of black nationalism should in no way really be based on white folk. How they have dealt with us. We should want to build the political, social system we want to build whether white people ever existed in the world. Nothing to do with the existence of white folk and being treated by white folk. It's having an ideology and philosophy that you think is right and equitable and for the best interest of all the people as such. And that should reign on earth whether white people existed or not. When you have an economic, a social system, a political, or ideology that is a reactionary system, that is a reaction to how you've been treated by another people, then that ideology is still externalized, is still the responsibility of that other people. Because when they change, you will change. And in a sense, they can manipulate then the ideology through the manipulation of their own attitudes and their own behaviors. And consequently, you will see people moving back and forth and having all kinds of confusions by the movement and behavior of whites. Even nationalists who have built their behavior on this. And so you have many reactionaries. Hate can be built upon love, just as love can be built upon hate. And that's why they're so closely allied. Some people love because they hate, And much of so-called love comes out of hate. Much of the love we have because of the situation we're in is based on hatred. That's why even our love often comes out destroying us. Self-hatred. When you hate yourself and fear yourself, you will love anything that helps you to escape from that self. That's why love becomes unrealistic. Because it takes one away from the reality of self. You see? And away from the confrontation with self. And so anybody or anything that gets us away from that feared self, we love it. Heart and soul. It makes us feel wonderful and delightful. Yeah. And see, the slick thing that the system has done is to make us fear ourselves. To make us hate. When you destroy people's culture and degrade a people's culture and degrade a people's physical features and degrade intrinsic parts of those people and degrade that people's history and assassinate their personality, they become frightened to identify with that personality. They become frightened to come face to face with it and to deal with it. They want to escape from it. And the vehicles that provide the escape route become loved and a source of great feelings of relief and release. And the person becomes attached to them. See, that's the reason why I tell people it's dangerous to define love as a feeling. I can't walk, I can't talk without you, baby. I can't eat, I can't sleep. My life can't go on. I must be in love. Nah. Nothing to do with love at all. You're in hate. Or heat. But the idea is, because if you define love as this unrealistic feeling and euphoria, if you define love as that which makes you obsessed about the loved one, where you can't eat and you can't sleep, then you will love heroin. You will love crack. All kinds of dope. All kinds of symbols. They do the same thing, don't they? I don't think about nothing but my car. If that helps you what? To escape. To not confront self. that takes you out of what? Reality. You love it. The drug addict does nothing but what? He can't sleep, he can't eat. He's always what? Thinking about his drug. You see? So, and so that's a hell of a way to define love. And often that love then is defined on self-hatred. A fear of self and an escaping of self. And because the drug provides that escape and so forth, it makes one feel good. And then one becomes attached to the good feeling and seeks to hold on to that good feeling and becomes addicted to the feeling itself. And now he gets that feeling at the price of escaping reality. You see, so many people get into love out of hate, but ultimately that hate which hides behind all that good feeling ends up doing what? Destroying the individual and destroying often the one that they love, and they can't quite figure it out. Why is it every man I fall in love with, we end up breaking up? Or every woman? Why is it that the black families break up when people marry because they're in love? Because apparently they're loving for what? The wrong reasons. See? And they're defining their love by feelings only. Baby, when I'm with you, I just feel thrills going down my spine. You know? The wrong reasons. You see? And hatred can be set up the backwards way as well. Love white folk. And they'd say, I'm sorry, you can't go to bed with me. Can't marry me. You know, I hate you. You know, it's just like a woman walks down the street, he whistles at her. If she doesn't pay him any attention, all of a sudden she becomes an ugly old time. And if she's giving him that other little stuff, oh wow, the queen, you know, a whole bit. And so his hatred is based on what? His desire, but the desire being what? Frustrated. So you can find some people backing into black nationalism, you see, out of a frustrated love for the master race. So consequently, you cannot look just at their ideology and their attendance in nationalist affairs as some indication of their true character. You see, you still have to look at motivations and look deep into the hearts of the people you're dealing with. It is very necessary, and we cannot escape that fact. So then, in an effort to maintain, so then I was talking about in terms of my friend, then I want to maintain your friendship, and the friendship is very important to me, and the relationship is very important to me. So I'm not going to go in with this blind trust and this whole idea of just saying, hey, now, you know, we're African, we ought to trust one another, and therefore, you know, I'm just going to give you this bunch of money, and you just do what you want with it. I know people personally who've been destroyed by just giving money to Africans and other people, you know, out of that illusion of brotherhood, without applying, you know, the normal controls and protections, and we're destroyed. So we sit down and we haggle for sometimes 2 weeks over contracts, not for distrust, but to make sure we understand each other. You understand by this word what I understand by this word. You understand the return on your investment occurs from this point, you see, and that cost must occur first, and this will occur first. Then this is what we mean. If you're investing in this unit, the word processing unit, word processing means thus and thus and thus and thus and thus. This money will be accounted for thus and thus and thus and thus and thus in this way. So we understand each other very clearly, so that there will not be a confusion there, and we can continue to grow together as friends and people, you see, and advance our interests as people. And so it is through the corporation and through the network that this business grew and is developing. and through the willingness then of people to make the necessary sacrifices given this set of social relationships. And you will see ultimately it is a set of social relationships that's at the foundations of anyone's economic development and any nation's and people's economic development. You read last week about the club downtown, the white club that was voting on whether it would let women in. And the thing that I found interesting about it, though, it's a club, it's a social group, and the thing about these social groups and the other groups, there was always a part of these groups, many of them was a social relationship. Often before the giving of the money took place, there was a party, the host fed the parties, and so there was an attempt there to produce a whole social relationship, just not a business relationship, but an atmosphere of fraternity and conviviality was created there as well. And it's interesting, of course, to note then, and as I go into business deeper and deeper, I see that business is a club. It's an informal club. You pay your dues to get in. You don't get credit, man. You got to pay out the bucks, you know. People come in and say, well, you should have this, you should have that, and they don't understand. At this point, I'm at the point of having to pay out. And everything I get, I got to pay because I'm not yet in the club, see. But after I pay a bit and get into the club, then I can say, okay, I want this on consignment. I want this for 90 days. I want this for 30 days. Then I have a man to ship me up some books or something. I sell his product before I have to pay him, then pay him with what I sold. Hold it, but you got to work up to that. In other words, then once people recognize you remember the club, what happens? You get breaks and things start to happen, you see. And so you see the essence, and as I go deeper into political organizations and the whole thing, you can see that it is ultimately the social network that is at the foundation of the economic and social functions of these groups. And why these men complain and these women complain? There's about 4,000 of them there or something, and it's a prestigious club because they take care of business in that club. And it's all about business. And while they're swimming naked in the swimming pools and doing all the whatever, acting business. And they're still determining yours and my fate at this point. Over tea or something, or whatever else and sitting there in an atmosphere of clubbiness and social relationships determining which way the world is going to go. And so we have to recognize then that a part of being educated in black business administration is not merely learning from the accounting books and how to balance accounts. And it's not merely marketing research and determining who has an expendable dollar and who doesn't have an expendable dollar. And not just determining pricing policy and macroeconomics and microeconomics and all of the other kinds of things that go into education. This is stuff that developed after social relations were developed, not before. That a part of the educating of our people may be in a business course, the educating of each other into trust and faith and confidence and self-knowledge and building social relationships and connections and networks. And therefore the dry course that's taught in the white Eurocentric university is not quite enough to be a foundation for black economic development, because the crucial elements which they do not teach in school but which are the essential elements of their economy are not being taught there, and they have to be taught and learned at some place. Those are taught. I tell people often that the white system has two systems of education, the formal one and then the informal one. The unrealistic one called college and high school, and the realistic one called life. And you see, even if a black were to get an equal education and learn exactly the same thing that a white learns in this school, he would still be at a disadvantage. Because as the New York lottery goes, you got to be what? In it to win it. I'm telling you. And so, even though you have this degree and you have this knowledge, if you're not really inside, if you're not really active and doing something, you're still not going to know it. Because the lesson in civics is not realistic in terms of how activities are really taking place down at City Hall. And so therefore your good white liberal professor who's so nice to you and so non-racial and so loving can afford to be because his brother got control of the real world. And because his brother has control of the real world, he can act the liberal part, you see. And then you can say, well, y'all hate white folk, and I know some good white folk, and, you know, and my professor was great to me, and not all white, you know, when we get into all of that confusion, because, you know, these leftists, these white leftists have projected themselves onto us and showing how nice white folk can be. While in reality, their rightist brothers have control of the economy. And so after that white boy leaves, he learns about what the real world is. And he literally almost throws away what he's learned in college. He just used that as basic concept. And now he's taught the real act of doing business. And that part, though, if we're not in it or don't study it hard and gather intelligence, we will never know about, you see. And therefore we confuse formal equality of formal education with real equality of education. And therefore the educating of a black economics graduate, you see, must be an education into reality. And must be an education carried on by people, not because they have degrees or they're in colleges and universities, but who've been parts and partial of activities and so forth, and can apprentice and mentor and bring people in and show them the realities of what is going on in the world. Now, I'll end it with this, and so we have to understand this kind of thing. And we'll see then that an understanding, a realistic understanding, realistic education is necessary for the development of our people. That the realistic economic development of African Americans is necessary for Pan-African development as well. Now, I see a lot of Negroes hide behind this black nationalism as an excuse to do nothing. Man, I'm not a part of this country. You know, I'm going back to Africa. Chances are you're not going back anywhere. And let's face the reality of the situation. And then, you know, but you're going to use that bravado to make an excuse for doing nothing. And therefore, I'm not going to engage in any kind of economic or social development or anything like that because this is a part of the American. Have you ever thought about taking over the system? Of subverting the system? You know, that never occurs to us, you know. The white South Africans run South Africa even though they are a minority because they have a connection with the other whites in the world. And simply because you're an African minority in this system doesn't mean that you can't get control of it. You see, we don't want to visualize it that way. We want to run from it. We have to face the fact that this is an economic giant still. Even though it's limping, it still is an economic giant in the world, ladies and gentlemen. And it still has a lot of juice left. That's right. Because as America stumbles and falls, the other world stumbles and falls. Why the Japanese worried about the falling dollar? Because the Japanese are an exporting nation, and their whole nation depends upon export. And if the United States stop buying their products, they're going to have problems over there. Instead, and there are all other issues going on in this area that we should try to get to understand very quickly here. What we must recognize then, and the United States now is pushing Germany to stimulate its economy. Why? Because you see, it is through the stimulation of those economies that the other nations of the world also are stimulated into economic growth and development. We must understand, as like people in America, what our role is in relationship to the economic development of Africans. Just merely throwing away the economic possibilities here behind some half-thought-out African nationalism is not going to make it. The stimulation of black economic development in America can be a part of the stimulation of black economic development everywhere in the world. And you must look at it and see what that really means. When I sell African beads and pocketbooks or other products over there, I am stimulating production in Africa as well. And that's what I sell over there too. The African ambassador came to my shop last week. We talked about moving African products and other kinds of products. When I sell African culture through that shop, I not only just sell African ideas, but we help also to stimulate growth and development in Africa and in the Caribbean and in other places as well. We have don't let people talk you into economic non-activity in America. Because your economic activity here can be a stimulant for economic activity all over this world. The services that you learn to sell here are the same services that you can sell in Africa and in the Caribbean. The knowledge that you gain in these universities and schools here is the knowledge that can be transferred over to other universities and systems. If finally they do throw you out, you still have something to carry with you somewhere else. But to give up and fall back on some kind of half-thought-out excuse, it doesn't make any sense at all. And you have to think it through. So as black nationalists, you got to think this thing through and get off of this emotional bit about, you're going back to Africa and all of this other kind of thing, and therefore you're not going to engage in. And there's some Negroes who think since they don't engage in business, they're somewhat less capitalist than black people who do, even though they're working downtown like the rest of us. So somehow you're less capitalist because you're not engaging in a business enterprise. And we have some of the others who, in order to maintain their ideological purity, don't do anything but criticize and point fingers, you see, and they don't want to get their fingers dirty. The thing is, we got to look at what's going on. There's a connection between economic activity, and the other thing here is we got money. We should not only invest that money in 125th Streets and the other black streets across this nation, you should invest it downtown. You work down there. The black dollar is down there. White people think if you own a place down there, it's owned by white folk anyway. So separate them from their money. We should be giving and supporting war in South Africa today, not just doing marches and giving lip service. We should be financing that war through the buying of arms and running guns and everything else to those people up there, not just walking around with picket signs. But you're not going to do that if you don't use the money. Do you know that these people are selling drugs to black people to execute wars all over this country? That the CIA is in drug smuggling to put into the veins of black boys and girls here and use that money to devastate black communities and give that money to Contras and other groups to destroy liberty and the freedom of other people? Do you know that the whole nation of England to a great extent is based upon drug money? And if you read the history of the opium wars, that the selling of drugs and the addicting of the Chinese to drugs was British government policies run by lords and sirs and ladies of England, that the banks in the Caribbean and the other places are there to do what? Laundry dirty money and drug money. That Hong Kong and these other places are the center of criminal money and activity. But you got to know what's going on, and you got to hook it in and be in on it and see what's happening here. But you can't do it hanging out and playing games with yourself. You got to get into it and see what is actually occurring and change the course of those activities by being a part of it. Diamonds are sold without people even knowing what the price are. Only 300 people are allowed to see what diamonds are. Why is Israel at the center of the diamond market, has no diamonds in it at all? And South Africa has literally total control of the diamond and gold market, and the Jews have control of the diamond market and gold market in New York City. Come on. See what's going on in the world and how these prices and how gold is used to trade for drugs and how it's laundered through. But we're caught out. You got to get down there. Invest down there. Invest. You use Con Ed's electricity. Why not invest and get some money back from Con Ed? Why not be a part of Con Ed and don't just beg for jobs, but demand it because you're a member of the doggone board. That's why you can get the job. And be so wrapped in it until you know what's going on, no matter which move they make. You're right on top of it. There are many ways now to invest, and I'm just getting it in here. Stock brokering and banking investment. A lot of black nationals have a problem with economics. with politics. Well, I don't vote because I'm not a part of the system. Think a little bit now. You need conferences on what is our relationship to voting in America. Okay? What do we accomplish by voting? You see, what is the economic function of politics? Woodrow Wilson says what? The business of government is what? Business. Business. That's all it is, man. This government is not about more welfare and fair housing. It's about business. But we are given the welfare end of the thing, and you got politicians running on welfare platforms. The Board of Education is going to spend $5 billion this year. $5 billion. Tremendous wealth. More than many nations have available to them. They got some of these nations hanging on a stake because they owe something like $200 million. IMF is going to make them literally starve their people to pay that money back. And the Board of Education itself, as one unit in New York City, is spending $5 billion. That can make a lot of millionaires. And yet over 70% of this school system is black and Hispanic. And you wonder why Jews and other groups continue to sit on there even though their children are not in it? Because they're going to steal the money and give it to their own people and tell you they're making it because they're smart. It has nothing to do with being smart. Reading this scandal should open your eyes to the reality of what goes on in government. Get out of those civics books and see what's going on here. As I told people, look here, if I had a member of the Board of Education and he came to my stationery department and said, look, hey, I need chalk for all the people in New York City, all the kids in New York City, and I can get you that contract. I don't have to be smart. Nothing at all. I got $1 million, $2 million in my pocket. Why? Because I got a friend on the Board of Education who's now going to do what? Channel millions, not pennies, millions. And therefore electing people to the Board of Education is not just about educating children, but about determining the allocation and distribution of what? Wealth. Your tax money. Money that you have put in and paid with your hard labor, and money for which your foreparents were not given one red cent. And therefore you're deserving of it, and you should get every nickel and penny of it. And the reason why you then elect somebody to the Board of Education and elect them here is not because you're into the American system in an American way. It's because you're going to get in there and get that money out and use it to your own advantage to advance the interests of your people. And this is what it's about. When you get black mayors, find out what investment banking means. Find out what public finance means. And look into what that is about. A beautiful thing. Do you know people can invest $1 million or more into what? And you hear it all the time. What's this guy advertised on TV all the time? Somebody's municipal bonds? Which one is it? Lebendorf. And what is he saying? Make money, don't pay taxes. Make money, don't pay taxes. How do you do that? Investing in what? City, state bonds. What is a city and state bond? It's just the way that the city and state borrow. Of New York, and you saw they fired a lot of people. To pay whom? Rich people. People who already had more money than they know what to do with. Our money. But it's not coming to whom? It's not coming to us. But when you neglect electoral politics, when you elect what real public office is about, you're just electing to be robbed and stolen from. And then you don't have to talk about welfare. You see, because you can take the money out of the public treasury and feed your people with it. That's what the other people are doing with it. That's why they're not talking about welfare, because they don't call it welfare, but they're still robbing the public treasury. And they rob it through robbing elections. voters. That's why they get out there and vote like mad and get control of the situation like mad. The election of black mayors, businesses, municipal governments have millions of dollars in pension funds. Those funds have to be invested to earn interest and so forth, to pay people who are in retirement, to pay people who have insurance and all of those kinds of things. So the city represents a tremendous amount of business, millions of dollars. So the role of the public investor is to invest that city money in various places so that the return can be made on that money, and to determine who will get that money. When you got a black mayor and you got an Afrocentrically conscious controller and so forth, they can then direct that money in areas that can be advantageous for themselves and their people and so forth. So you just don't elect a black mayor because he's some symbol and some model for your kids. You elect him because he's going to make money for your kids, because it represents an enriching of the community. Because when he gets in, if he has consciousness, and if there's a voting group behind him, they can redistribute the wealth that the city treasurer and the state treasurer and the other treasurer represents back to themselves. But when you jump behind some half-thought-out Afrocentric ideology and refuse to look into the system and understand how it works, then that Afrocentric ideology is going to be identified with wealth and poverty and all the other kinds of things that we talk about today. And so we have to understand that very clearly. I got to end it here. Thank you very much for your attention.